You can't see that very well because of the lights in the sun coming in, and what a nice thing it is to have the sun coming in. But that is a picture of myself and my mom. She was on her 90th birthday, and I flew out to visit her on her 90th birthday, and that's a picture of that. I start with that not only because it's Mother's Day, but because my mom, as I remember her, was a very fascinating person. Fascinating in the sense that I know everyone's mom is fascinating, but mine, she was very capable. She was a very talented woman. She raised 4 kids, and then when I graduated high school in 1974, my mom became a teacher. She had wanted to be a teacher all her life, but she paused on that dream to raise us. And then when she was kind of done raising us, we were able to drive and things like that. I don't think moms ever stop raising their kids, but she then went back to college and got her degree and taught kindergarten, of all things, for the next 25 years. And she was good at it. She got recognized. She was recognized also for her ability in some other areas. She, growing up when she was in college, she considered a professional singing career. And there was this guy named Mario Lanza who was this opera singer from New York City, and he came out to Wisconsin and heard her sing and told her she had the voice of an angel. So we have this woman who's competent, who's got skills, who should be just really confident in her skills and in who she is. And yet, my mom was not. My mom was not a confident person. I've told you before that she was a worrier, but she was also just not confident in her own skin. She didn't feel comfortable in many ways in her own skin. And maybe, I don't know why that was. Maybe it was because her mother, my grandma was a force of nature. My grandma was like 5'6", 5'7", and you didn't get in grandma's way. If you did, you got knocked over, or you went with her. My grandma made money selling furniture in a small town in Wisconsin in the Depression. And then my grandpa, my mom's dad, was the exact opposite of my grandmother. He was that Northern European, upper Midwestern reserved personality that my grandpa really didn't know how to express emotions, express himself, so he didn't say very much. And when he did, because it was the upper Midwest, Northern European personality, it was easier to complain than to compliment. And so he would often complain to my mom or criticize my mom because, after all, she was the daughter and just paled by comparison when they compared her to my uncle and all of his talents and abilities. So that might have been part of my mom's feelings of not being good enough. That could have contributed some of it, and to her anxiety over being enough for us as kids, being enough for my dad as his wife, being enough as a teacher. It was always that anxiety, that fear that she wasn't enough. In a sense, marrying my dad did resolve some of that, because here was this guy who didn't have to love her, who did, who loved her for who she was, and saw in her the completion, the other half of his life. And that gave her great comfort and great confidence, except that she was always worried whether or not she was being enough of a wife to him. Was she doing what she should be to take care of him? And what if something happened to him? What if something happened to his job? I mean, we just bought this new house. What if he loses his job and we have to sell the house, and then where will we be? There was just this constant anxiety, this constant fear roiling in her heart, roiling in her mind. Except in one place. Except in one place. My mom loved Jesus. And she knew that no matter what happened, Jesus loved her. And she would express that faith, that confidence in him. She sometimes expressed it in yelling at him. because he didn't act according to the timetable she had in mind for answering her prayers. But other times, you would hear her sing her faith, sing the confidence she had in her Jesus. You could hear her 2 houses down sing. When she sat at the piano and sang the Lord's Prayer, the Millet version of the Lord's Prayer, with the alto parts that just echo, she would fill the house with the Lord's Prayer. She would fill the house with different hymns. And actually, I have a copy of one of the hymns that she sang on in a computer file. And I thought about playing that for you today, but I didn't think about it until about 6 o'clock this morning. And I was a little bit late to ask Carrie and Eric to try to figure out how to make that happen. So maybe some other time you'll get to hear her sing, Jesus grant that balm and healing in your, I believe it's your wounds I find. Jesus grant that balm and healing. She just sang that with such gusto and such confidence because in her faith, she had confidence. In her Lord, she had confidence. She passed that confidence, that faith, on to us as her kids. That was one thing she was sure, confident of, that she had done. Because even though we, as we hit our 20s, hit different directions in life, she was confident she had helped God plant that seed of faith in our hearts. In fact, the cross that I wear now, my younger brother, and he would be really thrilled that I called him my younger brother, because usually I call him my little brother, and he's 6'3". But my younger brother made this cross for my mom when she moved into the nursing home, because he wanted to make sure that even if her memory was slip-sliding away, even if her mind was slip-sliding away, she would wake up and she would see this cross right by her bedside and be reminded that no matter what, Jesus loved her. So I wear this cross as a reminder not only of my mom and the faith that she planted in our hearts, but also of the Jesus that comes with that cross in memory and recognition and celebration as we live in the Easter season. Because there are times, aren't there, when we need to be reminded of that, because things just cause us anxiety. There are things that trouble you, right? There are things going on in your life right now. There are diagnoses of disease. There are threats to your job. Being in school is really hard, especially all that social stuff and all the people pulling and tugging at who you should be and who you are. I mean, if you're a senior in high school, the angst of having to decide what you're going to do with the rest of your life. If you're in college, what are you going to do? What if you dreamt all your life of being X, and when you started studying that, you thought, oh, this is really not what I want to do. What do I want to do with my life? All of those questions, all of those fears. And then there are those other fears. What if I'm not good enough to be a teacher? What if I'm not good enough to be a nurse? What if I'm not good enough to be a friend? What if I'm not good enough to follow Jesus? What if I'm not good enough for Jesus to save? Because as you listen to Jesus this morning, as he talked about, he who loves me will obey my commandments. He who loves me will listen to my word. And when you compare those words of Jesus to the way you live your life, how many times do you listen to Jesus? How many times when you have a choice between his commandments and what you want, have you and I gone with what I want, what you want rather than what he wants? How many times in your life when you've had a chance to show the love of Jesus in your life have you chosen something else? And so that measuring stick that seems to be hidden in those words of Jesus when he talks about obeying his commandments and hearing his word, that measuring stick, when measured against you and me, leaves us lacking And so that fear that we might not be good enough for Jesus lingers. In fact, it becomes a tool of the devil to cast doubt, to make us be afraid of our God. And that's why Jesus speaks to his disciples that day in the upper room. Chapters 13, 14, 15, and 16, and probably 17 of John's gospel happen in the upper room just before Jesus is going to be crucified. They're going to see their rabbi arrested. They're going to see the Son of God himself crucified and die. And they're going to wonder, I thought he was God. I thought he was the Messiah. How can this happen? How can this be happening at all? The same questions you and I ask when bad things happen. How can this happen? I thought God was with me. I thought God was for me. Why is this happening now? And those questions Jesus anticipates in the hearts of his disciples and also in your heart and in mine. And so he gives us these assurances in advance so that when it happens, we'll know that he knew it was coming. We'll know that he planned for it. We'll know that he took action on that cross so that when he stretched out his arms to take the nails, stretched out his legs to receive those nails, when he took upon himself the condemnation that you and I deserve because of our sin, when he took upon himself the many times and places where we don't measure up, where we aren't good enough, when he took upon himself all of that and died the death you and I deserve, and took the grave you and I have only to look forward to, so that when he was raised from the dead, we would see his victory over those things that we thought would separate us from God's love. We would not worry about whether we were good enough, but we would know that he is. And in his resurrection, he raises us to live with him a new life, a life lived in him. My Father and I will come and dwell in that person, he promises. And so he gives this promise. Let not your hearts be troubled. Don't let those things trouble you. Don't let those things that bring anxiety, that make you anxious, that make you wonder if you're good enough, that make you wonder, does God love you? Does make you wonder, where is God? Don't let your hearts be troubled. It's easy to say, but it's more than just him encouraging or him saying, wouldn't it be nice if? It's him speaking his word into your heart and mine. That your hearts don't have to be troubled by these things because Christ has raised you to live that new life in him and with him. He gives you this gift as he raises you and me to live with him, this new life. It is a life in which those things from the outside can't penetrate, can't get to us because we're in him and he is in us. Let not your hearts be troubled, Jesus says on a couple of occasions in these chapters. And then he talks about his peace. His peace, my peace I live with you, not as the world gives peace. Eric was talking about some of those worldly moments where peace was part of the discussion. Winston Churchill, World War II, VJ Day, VE Day. I remember back in high school, 72, 73, 74, when the Vietnam War was just ebbing to its conclusion, stumbling to its end. And everyone was saying, let's give peace a chance. All we are saying is give peace a chance. And when the world talks about peace like that, all we are saying is give peace a chance. They're talking about an end to war. An absence, that people would lay the guns down, that people would turn the keys off on the tanks, that people would mothball the bomber jets, that nations would stop warring against nations and it would just be still. An absence of war is how the world defines peace. An absence of hostility, an absence of busyness. Isn't that how you describe peace? There was a book that we used to read to our kids when they were little. It was about a mom, mother elephant indeed, in the story. And all she wanted was 5 minutes peace. 5 minutes peace from her kids wanting something. 5 minutes peace from her kids needing something. 5 minutes peace from her kids, from her husband. 5 minutes peace, and that just meant 5 minutes of stillness in the bathtub in the story. 5 minutes of peace. And so it was an absence. It was a lack. It was a time to rest. It was a time for a nap. It was a time to relax because all the busyness was kept outside the door. That's not the peace that Jesus gives. He says, my peace I give you, not as the world gives, because the world gives it kind of a negative. It takes everything away so that there is peace. Not so with Jesus. When Jesus gives his peace, that word shalom that Eric greeted the kids with when they came down for the message, that word shalom in Hebrew isn't just a word that means peace or peace out or hi, although it means all those things, but it's a relationship word. It means that in shalom, in peace, the peace that God gives you so that you can give it to each other, it's a relationship happening. God is with you and you are with God, and that those gifts that you receive from being with God, you now share with those around you. So it's a vertical and a horizontal word, this peace. It's a something, though. It's not an absence, it's a something. Jesus gives his peace. He puts something there that wasn't there before. He puts a relationship with him. He makes relationships with those around you possible, rooted in who he is, rooted in what he's done, rooted in his peace. So that the peace that he gives is a something. And it's never a peace that sits still. You know, you think about being at peace, you think about that lawn chair in the backyard where you're going to take a nap. You think about that comfy couch. We used to have the world's most comfortable couch. You could be asleep in a nap in 30 seconds or less. It was the world's most comfortable couch. But that's not what Jesus' peace does. Peace with God, shalom with God. In the Old Testament, it meant that God's people were there in the world to be witnesses. Jesus tells his disciples, you're going to be witnesses to everything that I have done and showed you and taught you. In the Old Testament, God's people were made as they received his shalom, as they became in a relationship with him. They were activated, not deactivated. They were sent out to be a light to the Gentiles. They were sent out to be witnesses of what God has done. They were sent out to put the shalom with God in action in the world around them, in the lives of the people they interacted with, in their families, to the world, to bring that shalom of God into the world. So when Jesus says, my peace I give you, that real peace isn't an absence. It's a something that he gives. It's a relationship with him that he establishes with you. He puts himself in you. He puts his word in you. He puts his spirit in you. Not so that you can take a nap, but so that you and I can be busy for him, busy with his people, busy in the world, sharing that peace, showing that peace, sharing forgiveness, being God's love active in the world, so that people who don't know him might at least see and wonder, might at least see and ask, might at least hear and be changed by that word, by that peace, and have that peace as well. Gift this peace that he gives you. Where there wasn't something, he puts his something. so that you, with that something, can be his people, active, doing things, sharing his love, giving his forgiveness, being his people in the world. Amen. And now may the peace that passes understanding keep our hearts and minds in true faith in Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.